My name is Odette Ravenel. I am 22 years old. 6 weeks ago, I walked across the stage at my college graduation, and my parents did not clap for me. They did not cheer. They did not even look up. I know this because I looked for them the moment the announcer read my name, the way every graduate looks for their family in the crowd, and I found them in the 7th row, and they were not looking at the stage. They were looking down at their phones, waiting, because the name they had come to hear was not mine. It was my younger brother's. My brother Damian was graduating the same day, 2 ceremonies later, from the business school, and my parents had come for him. When my name was called, my mother did not stop scrolling. My father did not lift his head. There was a small, polite scatter of applause from the people around them, strangers being kind to a girl whose own family was not clapping, and I walked across the stage in that thin, scattered sound, took my diploma cover from the dean, shook her hand, and kept walking. After the ceremony, in the crush of families on the lawn, I found my parents. I was still in my gown. I was holding my empty diploma cover, because at my school, they hand you the cover on stage and mail the actual diploma later. My mother was already talking about getting to Damian's ceremony on time. I said quietly that I had just graduated, and my mother looked at me, and she said, in a voice that was not even cruel, just matter of fact, the way you state something obvious, Odette, we came for your brother today. He's the one we're proud of. You understand. I smiled. I said nothing. I turned and I walked away because there was nothing left to say to a sentence like that. A sentence that had been the quiet truth of my entire life, finally spoken out loud on the one day it should not have been. But here is what my parents did not know as they hurried off to my brother's ceremony. 10 minutes after I walked away from them, a staff member found me near the edge of the lawn and told me the dean needed me back. Not for a photo. Not for a mistake with my diploma. The dean of my college walked back out onto the stage, in front of the 4,000 people who had not yet dispersed, took the microphone, and told them she had one final thing to say before they left. And what she said, looking out at that crowd with my mother somewhere 7th row, was this. She said, "Before you go, I need to tell you about a member of today's graduating class, because there is one reason this campus still exists to hold a graduation at all, and almost none of you know her name." My mother, I am told, stopped clapping mid-motion. She did not understand yet. She was about to. Before I take you back to the beginning, take a second to hit subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you are watching this from and what time it is right now, where you are. I read every single one. Now let me take you back, because the graduation stage was the end of a 4-year story that started the week I almost did not go to college at all. I grew up in a small industrial town in western Pennsylvania, the older of 2 children. My father worked maintenance for a regional trucking company. My mother worked the front desk at a dental office. We were not poor exactly, but we were the kind of family where money was always a low hum of worry in the background, and where the question of whether the kids would go to college was genuinely open, not assumed. From the time we were small, my parents had a clear sense of which of their 2 children was the investment. My brother Damian was 2 years younger than me, and he was, from early on, the one my parents believed in. Damian was charismatic. Damian was good with people. Damian was the kind of boy adults described as a natural leader, the kind who would, my father always said, go far. My parents looked at Damian and saw a future. They looked at me and saw a girl who was good at math and quiet at parties and a little hard to read, and they were not sure what that added up to, so they mostly did not try to find out. I want to be precise about the shape of this, because the shape matters. My parents were not abusive yet. They did not mistreat me. What they did was simpler and, in its own way, more corrosive. They simply allocated their hope. Hope is a finite resource in a worried family. There was a certain amount of belief available, a certain amount of pride to be invested, and my parents invested almost all of it in Damian, because Damian was the safer bet, the one whose success they could already picture. I got the leftover belief, which is to say not much. I was fed and clothed and told to do my homework. I was not in any way I could feel believed in. I want to give you one scene that holds the whole thing. When I was 16, I made the regional finals of a state mathematics competition, one of only 4 students from my entire region. The finals were on a Saturday, 2 hours away. I needed a ride. I asked my parents weeks in advance. That same Saturday, my brother Damian, who was 14, had a junior varsity basketball game, a regular season game that did not matter much. My parents went to the basketball game. They drove me to the bus station instead, gave me money for a round-trip ticket, and told me to take the bus to my math competition, because they could not be in 2 places at once, and Damian's game was the priority. I took the bus, alone, 2 hours each way. I placed second in the region. I came home on the bus that night, and my parents were at the kitchen table talking about Damian's game, which his team had lost, And when I told them I had placed second in the entire region, my father said, "That's good," without looking up, and then went back to analyzing what had gone wrong in Damian's basketball game. I had taken a bus alone to compete against the best math students in the region and placed second, and it merited 4 syllables and no eye contact. My brother had lost a meaningless JV game, and it merited an hour of engaged family analysis. That was the arithmetic of belief in my family, and I had learned it so thoroughly by 16 that I had stopped expecting anything else. The clearest expression of this came when it was time for me to apply to college. I was a strong student. I had nearly perfect grades. I was particularly good at mathematics, in a way that one of my high school teachers, a woman named Ms. Pruitt, told me was genuinely unusual. Ms. Pruitt was the first adult who ever looked at me and saw something specific and valuable. She encouraged me to apply to good schools. She helped me with applications after school, on her own time, because my parents were not going to help. When I told my parents I had been accepted to several colleges, including one strong state university, my father's response was to do the math out loud at the kitchen table about how much it would cost and to conclude that the family could afford to really support one child through college and that the one child was going to be Damian, because Damian's potential justified the investment. I was told I could go to college if I wanted, but that I would be paying for it myself through loans and work and scholarships, and that I should be realistic about whether it was worth it for someone like me. For someone like me. I have thought about that phrase for 4 years. I almost did not go. I want you to understand how close it was. I had a college that had accepted me, a small private college about 3 hours from home that had offered me the best financial aid package, a combination of a substantial merit scholarship and work study that would cover most of the cost if I took on some loans and worked through school. But I almost did not go, because when the people who are supposed to believe in you tell you that someone like you should be realistic, it gets into you and it whispers that maybe they are right. Maybe you are not the kind of person college is for. What pushed me over the edge into going was Miss Pruitt. In the last week before I had to decide, she sat me down and said something I have never forgotten. She said, "Odette, your family has decided who you are. You do not have to accept their decision. You can go 3 hours away and find out who you actually are, in a place where nobody has already decided. That is what college is for people like us. It is not just an education. It is a chance to be reintroduced to yourself by people who do not already think they know you." So I went. I took the loans. I packed everything I owned into 2 duffel bags, and my mother drove me 3 hours to the small college, and dropped me off, and hugged me briefly, and drove home to my brother, and I stood in the parking lot of my new dormitory, alone, 22 hours after my 18th birthday, and I started the 4 years that would end on that graduation stage. I want to tell you about the college itself, because the college is the other main character in this story. And you cannot understand what happened on the stage without understanding what was happening to the college the entire time I was there. The college was small, about 2,000 students. It was the kind of small private liberal arts college that has existed in America for 150 years, the kind founded by some religious denomination in the 1800s, perched in a small town, educating generations of first-generation students and local kids and people who wanted something smaller and more personal than a big state university. It had a beautiful old campus, brick buildings, and a quad with enormous and it had, I would learn, a very serious problem. The problem was that it was dying, slowly, quietly, in the way that hundreds of small American colleges have been dying for the past 2 decades. The problem was enrollment. Fewer students were choosing small private colleges. The ones who did enroll were increasingly likely to leave before graduating, transferring out, or dropping out, which is the thing that actually kills a college, because a college's finances depend not just on getting students to come, but on getting them to stay year after year paying tuition. The college had a retention problem. Too many students were arriving as freshmen and then leaving before they graduated, and every student who left was a hole in the budget, and the holes were adding up year after year, and the college was quietly, steadily running out of money and running out of time. I learned later just how dire it had been. In the year before I arrived, the college's board had held an emergency meeting to discuss whether the institution could survive the decade. They had run the projections. If the enrollment decline and the dropout rate continued on their existing trajectory, the college would exhaust its modest endowment and reach insolvency in roughly 5 years. The board had quietly begun that year to explore what they called contingency options, which is the polite administrative phrase for figuring out how to shut a college down, how to teach out the remaining students and sell the campus and close the doors that had been open since the 1800s. None of this was public. A college that announces it is dying accelerates its own death because no family enrolls a freshman at an institution that may not exist by the time the student graduates. So the crisis was a secret, known to the board and the senior administration, and because he saw all the numbers, to Professor Bauer. The students walking across the beautiful quad under the old oak trees had no idea they were attending an institution that was making quiet plans for its own funeral. I did not know any of this when I arrived. I was an 18-year-old freshman trying to figure out where my classes were. What I knew was that I needed a work-study job to help pay for school, and that the financial aid office had assigned me to a work-study position in an office I had never heard of, called the Office of Institutional Research. I want to tell you what the Office of Institutional Research is, because almost nobody knows it exists, and it turned out to be the place where my entire life changed. The Office of Institutional Research is the office at a college that handles data. All the data. How many students enroll, how many leave, what grades they get, which majors they choose, which students struggle, which students thrive, what the patterns are. Every college has one, and almost no student ever interacts with it because it works entirely behind the scenes. My work-study job as a freshman was supposed to be simple data entry, taking paper forms and typing the numbers into spreadsheets. Boring, repetitive, $8 an hour, 15 hours a week. I was assigned to work under a man named Professor Emmett Bauer, who ran the office. Professor Bauer was in his 60s, a quiet, rumpled, brilliant man who had been doing institutional research at the college for 30 years, and who I would slowly come to understand was one of the only people on campus who fully grasped how much trouble the college was in, because he was the one who saw all the numbers. For my first few months, I did the boring data entry I had been assigned. But I was good at it, fast and accurate, and more than that, I was curious. I started, in the small, quiet way I do things, to actually look at the data I was entering, and because I was good at math, I started to see patterns in it. I started to notice things. The first thing I noticed, about 4 months into my freshman year, was a pattern in which students left the college. I had been entering data about students who had withdrawn, and I started to see that the students who left were not random. There were patterns. Certain kinds of students, with certain characteristics visible in the data, were far more likely to leave than others. And critically, the data suggested that many of these students showed warning signs visible in their records, weeks or even months before they actually left. A drop in grades in a specific pattern, a change in the number of classes they were registered for, a failure to register for the next semester by a certain date. The students who left were in a sense sending up flares in the data long before they walked out the door, and nobody was watching the flares. I mentioned this to Professor Bauer one afternoon nervously, expecting to be told that a freshman doing data entry should not be drawing conclusions. Instead, Professor Bauer put down what he was doing, and he looked at me for a long moment, and he said, "Show me what you're seeing." I showed him. I had made a small spreadsheet on my own time, tracking the patterns I had noticed. Professor Bauer studied it for a long time, and then he said something that changed my life. He said, "Odette, I have been seeing pieces of this for years, but I have never had the time or, frankly, the statistical skill to put it together properly. You have a gift for this. I want to make you a different kind of offer. I want to take you off data entry. I want to train you. I want to teach you everything I know about institutional research, and I want us to figure out, together, whether we can build something that actually predicts which students are at risk of leaving early enough to do something about it. Because if we could do that, if we could identify at-risk students months before they leave and get them help, we might be able to save this college. And I am not exaggerating when I say the college needs saving. I was 18 years old. I had been told 6 months earlier by my own family that someone like me should be realistic. And here was a brilliant man, 30 years into his career, telling me I had a gift and asking me to help him save an entire institution. I said yes before he finished asking. I want to tell you what that first year of apprenticeship actually felt like, because it was the year I became a different person than the one my family had defined. Professor Bauer did not hand me anything easy. He gave me real statistics texts, graduate-level material, and he expected me to work through them. And when I got stuck, he would sit with me at the small whiteboard in the corner of the office and walk me through it. Never impatient, never condescending, treating my confusion as a normal part of learning, rather than as evidence that I did not belong. This was so different from how I had been treated my whole life that for the first few months, I kept waiting for it to turn, waiting for the moment he would sigh and decide I was not worth the trouble. The moment never came. He just kept teaching me week after week, And slowly I stopped waiting for the disappointment and started to believe that maybe this man actually meant it, actually saw something real in me. There was a specific evening, about 8 months in, when something shifted permanently. We had been working on an early version of the model, and I had been struggling with a particular statistical problem for 2 weeks, a problem in how to weight different risk factors so the model would not be thrown off by misleading correlations. I had gone home for the weekend, and I had not been able to stop thinking about it, and on Sunday night, lying in my narrow dormitory bed, the solution had come to me all at once, the way these things do. I had gotten up and worked it out on paper at 2 a.m. When I showed Professor Bauer on Monday, he looked at my solution for a long time, and then he took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes, and he said, "Odette, this is better than how I would have done it. I have been doing this for 30 years, and you, after 8 months, just solved this more elegantly than I could have. I need you to hear me say that." I had never, in 18 years, heard an adult tell me I had done something better than they could. I went back to my dorm that night and I cried, not from sadness, from the strange, overwhelming feeling of being recognized for the first time. And together, over 3.5 years, we built a model. The model was, in plain terms, an early warning system for student dropout. It took all the data the college had about its students, hundreds of variables, and it used that data to calculate for every single student a risk score, a number that estimated how likely that student was to leave the call club before graduating. The model was sophisticated. It got better every semester as we fed it more data and refined it. By my junior year, the model could identify, with genuine accuracy, which students were at high risk of dropping out, often months before the students themselves had consciously decided to leave. But a prediction is useless if nothing is done with it. So the second half of what we built was a system for acting on the predictions. When the model flagged a student as high risk, that student's name went onto a list, and the list went to a small team of academic advisors and counselors who would reach out to that student, not in a punitive way, in a supportive way. A simple human, "Hey, we noticed you might be having a hard time, how can we help?" Sometimes the student needed tutoring. Sometimes they needed financial help they did not know was available. Sometimes they needed mental health support. Sometimes they just needed one adult on campus to notice them and care. The model identified who needed reaching. The humans did the reaching. I want to tell you about one of those students because somewhere in the second year, I stopped seeing the model as numbers and started seeing it as people. There was a young man, a sophomore, I will call him by a changed name, Marcus, whose risk score spiked sharply one October. The model flagged him. An advisor reached out. It turned out Marcus had lost his part-time job, was about to be unable to pay his tuition balance, was too ashamed to tell anyone, and had quietly decided to drop out at the end of the semester and not come back. Because the model caught the pattern in his data, the registration gap, the small changes, the advisor reached him in time, connected him to an emergency aid fund he had not known existed, and helped him find a new campus job. Marcus stayed. Marcus graduated a year ahead of me. I met him once, briefly, though he never knew I was connected to the system that saved him. He was just a student who almost fell through and did not. There were hundreds of Marcuses over 4 years. The number on the spreadsheet, the retention rate climbing from 68 to 83%, was hundreds of individual young people who almost disappeared and instead got to stay and finish what they had started. I think about that more than I think about the money or the recognition. Hundreds of people got to become who they were going to become because an old professor and an overlooked girl built something in a basement office. I want to tell you what happened to the numbers because the numbers are how you save a college. In the year before we deployed the model, the college's freshman to sophomore retention rate, the percentage of freshmen who came back for a second year, was 68%. That meant nearly a third of every freshman class was leaving after 1 year. That number was killing the college. It was the slow bleed that was draining the budget and pushing the institution toward closure. The first year we ran the model and the outreach system, the retention rate went up to 76%. The second year, 79%. By my senior year, it was 83%. We had cut the dropout rate roughly in half. And because every retained student is tuition that keeps flowing, year after year, the financial effect was enormous. The model and the outreach system, by my senior year, were generating millions of dollars a year in retained tuition that would otherwise have walked out the door. The college, which had been on a path to closure within about 5 years, was suddenly stable, more than stable. It had a future. And then something happened that I had not anticipated. The college's success became visible to the outside world. Higher education is a small world, and people noticed that this little dying college had reversed its death spiral. Professor Bauer presented our work at a national conference. Other colleges wanted to know how we had done it, and then the attention got bigger. A major foundation that funds educational innovation heard about the work and awarded the college a large grant, over $4 million, to expand the program and to study it so that it could be shared with other struggling colleges across the country. Our little model, built by an old professor and a first-generation student in a basement office, was about to become a template that might help save dozens of other colleges. Through all of this, I stayed almost entirely invisible. This was partly Professor Bauer's doing, in a way I did not fully understand until later, and partly my own nature. I had been raised to expect no recognition, to do my work in silence, and so I did. I was a student. I had classes and homework and a part-time job in addition to the model work. I was not a public figure. The college's administration knew, in a general way, that the Institutional Research Office had built the retention system, and they knew Professor Bauer led it, but the specific fact that the core mathematical model, the actual engine of the whole thing, had been designed primarily by an undergraduate student was not widely known. It was in the documentation for anyone who looked carefully. It was just that almost nobody looked. I want to tell you about Professor Bauer, because what he did at the end is the reason there was a moment on that stage at all. Professor Bauer had become, over 4 years, the most important mentor of my life. He was the father my own father had never been, in the specific sense that he believed in me, completely and without reservations. And he showed it not with words, but with the gift of his time and his knowledge and his trust. He gave me real responsibility. He treated my ideas as valuable. He pushed me to be better. And he watched over 4 years as I bloomed in the soil of his belief into someone my own family would not have recognized. He also knew my family situation, because over 4 years of working closely together, it had come out, in pieces. He knew my parents had not wanted to pay for my education. He knew they had invested their belief in my brother. He knew because I had told him once, late on a winter evening when we were both tired and the office was quiet, that my parents had never once, in 4 years, asked me a single substantive question about my work, and that they did not really know what I did, and that they had never visited the campus, not once, in 4 years. What I did not know was that Professor Bauer had spent my senior year quietly making sure that the truth of what I had done would not stay invisible. He had gone to the dean, he had documented in detail the central role I had played in building the model that saved the college, and he had arranged, without telling me, for the college to recognize me at graduation. I did not know any of this. On graduation day, I knew only that I was graduating, that my parents had come for my brother, and that I had built something I was quietly proud of, even if no one in my family would ever understand it. I want to take you back to the stage now. The graduation was held outdoors, on the great lawn, under the old oak trees, on a bright morning in May. 4,000 people in folding chairs, the graduating class in our gowns. I had looked for my parents as I processed in, and I had found them in the 7th row, and I had seen them not looking at the graduates, looking at their phones, waiting for the part that did not involve me. When my name was called, the way I told you at the beginning, they did not clap. I walked across the stage in the thin, scattered applause of kind strangers. The dean, a woman named Dr. Aurelia Voss, shook my hand and gave me my diploma cover, and there was a flicker of something in her face as she did, a kind of held secret, but I did not register it at the time. I kept walking. I found my parents on the lawn afterward. My mother said the sentence, "He is the one we are proud of, you understand." I smiled and I said nothing, and I walked away because I had finally received in plain language, on the day that should have been mine, the explicit version of the thing I had always known. I walked to the edge of the lawn. I was going to leave. I was going to get in my car and drive away and let my parents go to my brother's ceremony and let the day be what it was. And then a young woman in a staff polo shirt came hurrying toward me through the crowd, slightly out of breath, and said, "Are you Odette Ravenel? Dean Voss needs you back at the stage. Right now, please." I did not understand. I thought something was wrong. I followed her back through the crowd, confused, still in my gown, and as I approached the stage, I saw that Dr. Voss had walked back out to the podium and was picking up the microphone, and the crowd, which had begun to disperse, was turning back toward her. I want to tell you what Dr. Voss said as closely as I can remember it, because I have replayed it many times. She said, "Ladies and gentlemen, before you leave, I need a few minutes of your time. I need to tell you something that I think is the most important thing I will say today. 4 years ago, this college was dying. I can say that now, on a day of celebration, because it is no longer true, but it was true. And many of you in the audience who are connected to this institution know it was true. We were losing too many students. We were running out of money. The serious projections, the ones we did not talk about publicly, gave this college about 5 years before we would have had to close our doors. This graduation, these graduates, this beautiful morning under these trees almost did not exist. There almost was no campus left to graduate from. The crowd had gone very quiet. I was standing at the side of the stage now, near the steps, not understanding why I had been brought there. Dr. Voss continued, "The reason we are still here, the reason this college has a future, the reason your sons and daughters and grandchildren will be able to attend this institution is a system that was built over the past 4 years in a small office most of you have never heard of. A system that identifies students who are struggling and gets them help before they fall away. That system has cut our dropout rate in half. It has stabilized our finances. It has earned this college national recognition and a major federal grant. And it is now being studied as a model for saving small colleges all across this country. We did not just save ourselves. We may help save dozens of other colleges like us." She paused, and then she said, "That system was built by 2 people. One of them is Professor Emmett Bauer, who has served this college for 30 years and who is here today." There was applause, and Professor Bauer, sitting among the faculty, stood briefly and nodded. "The other person," Dr. Voss said, "is a member of today's graduating class. She came to us 4 years ago as an 18-year-old freshman on financial aid working a work-study job entering data. And over 4 years, while carrying a full course load and working to pay for her own education, she designed the mathematical heart of the system that saved this institution. The predictive model that identifies at-risk students, the actual engine of everything I have just described, was built primarily by an undergraduate, by a student, by one of you. I am told she would never have mentioned it. I am told she does not seek attention. But I am not willing to let her walk off this stage today without this entire community knowing what she did. Because there is one reason this campus still exists to hold a graduation at all, and her name is Odette Ravenel, and I am going to ask her to come back up here, right now, so that all of us can thank her. I want to tell you what it felt like to hear my name said that way, in that place, in front of 4,000 people, 10 minutes after my own mother had told me my brother was the one they were proud of. It felt like being seen, not flattered, not praised. Seen. It felt like the moment Ms. Pruitt had promised me 4 years earlier, the moment of being reintroduced to myself by people who had not already decided who I was. I walked up the steps onto the stage, and Dr. Voss was smiling at me, and Professor Bauer was on his feet again. And the 4,000 people who had been about to leave were on their feet too, and the sound, the actual physical sound of 4,000 people standing and applauding, washed over me, and it was the loudest sound I had ever heard, and it was for me, and somewhere in the 7th row my mother was hearing it too. I am told, by people who were near them, what happened to my parents during Dr. Voss's speech. I am told that when Dr. Voss began talking about the system that saved the college, my parents listened the way everyone listens, with mild interest. I am told that when she said the model was built by a graduating student, my father said something to my mother, something idle. And I am told that when Dr. Voss said my name, my mother, who had been clapping along with the general applause, stopped. Her hands stopped in mid-motion. And she did not move for a long moment, and then she sat down slowly, even though everyone around her was standing, because she could not stand, because the floor of the story she had told about her 2 children for 22 years had just dropped out from under her, in front of 4,000 people. I did not look for her on the stage. I want to be honest about that. In the moment, standing up there in the applause, I did not look for my mother's face. I had spent 22 years looking for my parents' approval and not finding it, and in the one moment when I finally had everything that approval was supposed to feel like, I did not need them to see it. The seeing I needed was happening from 4,000 strangers and one old professor who had believed in me when my own family would not. My parents' seeing had become, in that moment, beside the point. That, more than the applause, was the real graduation. I had graduated from needing them to see me. I want to tell you what has happened in the 6 weeks since. My parents did go to my brother's ceremony that afternoon, though I am told it was a strange, subdued affair for them. My brother Damian graduated from the business school. He is a good person, my brother, and this is important to say, because the family story was not his fault any more than it was mine. He was handed the role of the favored child the same way I was handed the role of the overlooked one, and he did not ask for it, and he has had his own quiet struggles with what it did to him, the pressure of being the one all the hope was invested in. Damian found me that evening. He had heard what happened at my ceremony, because by then everyone had heard. And my brother, to his great credit, hugged me and he said, "I didn't know. Odette, I swear I didn't know what you'd done. Why didn't you ever tell us?" And I told him the truth, which was that I had stopped telling our family things years ago. because telling them had only ever produced the silence before the subject changed, and that I had learned to do my work where the silence could not reach it, Damian cried. We have talked more in the past 6 weeks than in the previous 10 years. The family story damaged him too, in the opposite direction, and we are slowly finding each other underneath it. My parents have struggled. My mother called me 4 days after graduation. She was not able, at first, to say anything direct. She talked around it. She mentioned that it had been a lovely ceremony. She mentioned that people had said nice things. And then, finally, in a small voice, she said, "I didn't know what you were doing there. All these years, I didn't know." And I said gently, "Because I was not interested in cruelty, you didn't ask, Mom. For 4 years, you never asked." And she was quiet, and then she said, "No, I didn't." It was the first true thing she had said to me in a very long time. We are not repaired. I want to be clear about that, because the easy version of this story ends with a tearful reconciliation on the lawn, and life is not that easy. My parents spent 22 years investing their belief in my brother and withholding it from me, and a single speech by a dean does not undo 22 years. What the speech did was make the truth undeniable, and the undeniable truth has forced my parents to begin a reckoning they spent 2 decades avoiding. My mother and I are talking. The talking is awkward and slow and full of long pauses, but it is honest now in a way it never was, because the comfortable lie that I was the lesser child has been destroyed, publicly and permanently, and we are both standing in the rubble of it, trying to figure out what to build instead. As for me, I accepted a job. The foundation that gave the college the grant offered me a position, working on the team that will take the model Professor Bauer and I built and adapted to help other struggling colleges across the country. I am going to spend the next several years of my life using the thing I built to save other institutions full of students like me, first-generation students at small colleges, students whose families told them to be realistic, students who are sending up flares in the data that no one is watching. I am going to be the one who watches the flares. It is the best job I can imagine. Professor Bauer is consulting on the project. We will keep working together. He told me when I got the offer that I was the best thing that had happened to his career in 30 years. And that he had decided, the day I showed him that first spreadsheet as a frightened freshman, that his real job for the rest of his career was to make sure the world did not overlook me the way my family had. I did not know, until he said it, that someone had been quietly protecting my future for 4 years. It is the opposite of what my family did. It is what family is supposed to do. Professor Bauer did it, and he was not even related to me. I had one more conversation with my mother that I want to tell you about, because it is the closest thing this story has to a turning point with her. About 3 weeks after graduation, she drove the 3 hours to my college town, alone, without telling me she was coming, and she found me at the small apartment I was renting for the summer before my job started. She stood in my doorway and she asked if she could come in. We sat at my small kitchen table, the same kind of kitchen table where the arithmetic of belief had been done my whole life. And my mother said something I had waited 22 years to hear, though by the time it came, I no longer needed it the way I once had. She said, "I have been trying to understand how I did not see it. You were right there, in my house for 18 years, and you were this person who could do what you did, and I looked at you every single day and I didn't see it. I keep asking myself how a mother does that. And I think the answer is that I decided who you were before you ever had a chance to show me, and then I stopped looking because I thought I already knew. I stopped looking at my own daughter when she was a child, and I never started again, and I missed all of it." She cried. I did not rush to comfort her, because the comfort was not mine to give, and because she needed to sit in it. But I told her that I was willing to let her start looking now, at who I actually was, as long as she understood that she was meeting me for the first time. That the daughter she thought she had raised was a person she had invented, and that the real one was a stranger she would have to actually get to know. She said she wanted that. We are at the very beginning of it. It is not a reconciliation. It is an introduction 22 years late between a mother and the daughter she never met. I want to tell you what I have learned, because the learning is why I am telling you any of this. The first thing I have learned is that being overlooked by the people who are supposed to believe in you is not a verdict on your worth. It is a verdict on their vision. My parents looked at me and could not see what was there. And for most of my life, I made the natural mistake of assuming that their inability to see me meant there was nothing to see. But the failure was in their eyes, not in me. The same girl my parents could not find anything special in was, at the exact same time, building something that saved an entire college. I had not changed between the kitchen table and the stage. Only the quality of the looking had changed. If the people who were supposed to believe in you do not, Please consider the possibility that you are not lacking. They are. Belief is a kind of sight, and some people, even people who love you, are simply unable to see certain things. Their blindness is real, and it costs you, but it is not the truth about you. The truth about you is what you actually are and what you actually do, whether or not anyone with the right last name is looking. Build your life on what you actually are, not on what the people with poor vision were able to see. The second thing I have learned is that the most important thing that can happen to an overlooked person is to find one person who sees them, and that this one person is often not in their family at all. For me, it was Ms. Pruitt, who told me I had a gift and pushed me to leave. And then it was Professor Bauer, who took a frightened freshman doing data entry and decided to pour 30 years of knowledge into her because he saw what she could become. Two people, neither of them related to me, changed the entire trajectory of my life simply by seeing me clearly and acting on what they saw. If your family cannot see you, please do not conclude that you are invisible. Conclude instead that you are looking for your seers in the wrong place. They are out there. They are often teachers, mentors, coaches, the occasional kind stranger who notices something. Your job is to stay open, to keep showing your work to the world, so that when one of these people crosses your path, they have something to see. And if you have already found such a person, if there is someone in your life who saw you when your family did not, please go and tell them what they did for you. In plain words, while they can still hear it, they may not know. Professor Bauer did not fully know what he had been to me until I told him, 6 weeks ago, that he had been the father I never had. The telling mattered. Tell your person. Do not wait. The third thing I have learned, and the last thing I want to give you, is that the deepest freedom is not being seen by the people who overlooked you. It is no longer needing them to. For 22 years, the engine underneath my whole life was the hunger for my parents to finally see me, to finally be proud, to finally clap when my name was called. I thought for most of my life that the happy ending would be the moment they did. But standing on that stage, in the applause of 4,000 strangers, with my mother sitting stunned in the 7th row, I discovered something that surprised me. I did not need her to clap anymore. The need had quietly died at some point in those 4 years, placed by something better, which was the solid, unshakable knowledge of what I had actually done, held inside me, independent of anyone's recognition. The dean's speech was a gift, but it was not what saved me. What saved me was the 4 years of building something real, in silence, that made me into a person who no longer required an audience to know her own worth. If you are still waiting for the people who overlooked you to finally see you, please understand that their seeing, if it comes, will be nice, but it will not be the thing that frees you. The thing that frees you is becoming someone whose worth does not depend on their seeing. You build that person quietly, over years, through the work you do when no one is watching and no one is clapping. And one day you realize you have stopped waiting for the applause, because you no longer need it, because you finally know, all the way down, exactly who you are. That is the graduation that matters, not the one with the gown. The one where you finally walk free of the need for the approval that was always, all along, beside the point. Before you go, tell me something in the comments. Tell me about the person who saw you when your own family could not. A teacher, a coach, a mentor, a stranger. Tell me what they saw, and what they said, and what it made possible in your life. And if you are still waiting to be seen, tell me what you are building, quietly, right now, that the people who overlooked you know nothing about. There are more of us than the families who could not see us would ever guess. We are out here, building things in the silence, becoming people our families would not recognize. Tell me yours. I will be reading every single comment. I will see you in the next one.